This is the wildly wonderful podcast, Wide Open Spaces with Elise, aka the Fiery Redhead, where I get raw, edgy, and not so politically correct. You can listen to this podcast anywhere you love listening to your favorite podcast. Go to wideopenspaceswithelise.com or eliselitwin.com. You can also go to all my social media, like, love, and follow. Now let's listen, let's talk, and let's evolve together. Welcome for episode number 191, Mental Health Awareness Month. How do you grieve? Well, before we move on with that topic, I'd like to give out my weekly shout out to my downloads, which come from over 88 countries. And this week I will highlight 4 of them: Canada, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and Uzbekistan. I love saying that, Uzbekistan. Sounds so exotic. Maybe one day I'll get there to any of these places. I'd love to visit. Traveling is my true personal passion. So in Mental Health Awareness Month, I want you to think about that. What is your true personal passion? Well, the title of this is How Do You Grieve? That's a big one, right? It's a lot. It's heavy. When we think of the word grief, immediately it goes to loss of a loved one, someone who has passed away, a pet who has passed away, a family member, a friend, a significant other, a spouse, God forbid, a child. That's where our brains go with grief. But grief comes from so many other avenues. Loss of a job, a big breakup, having to move away from the only home you've ever known, loss of a friendship that breaks up, letting go of someone who's toxic. They may be toxic, but you still grieve the loss of their friendship or their place in your life. There's grief of things that we lose. Sometimes financially, our lives change, and we grieve what we had or how we lived. There's so many ways and things that we grieve over. And grief is very personal. Each and every one of us chooses to grieve in our own way, or chooses not to grieve. Which category do you fall into? I'm somewhere in the middle on that one when it comes to grief. Sometimes I want to let it all out, and sometimes I want to stuff it. I know you can relate. A lot of you can relate to that. And stuffing it is really the easier route. Just keep on stuffing it, turning it off, not thinking about it, not feeling it. If you're currently going through grief, see, when I say, how do you grieve? Well, some grief is more recent than others. But does grief ever truly go away? I think it depends on what you're grieving. If you're grieving the loss of a dysfunctional relationship, you wanted that relationship over, but you still grieve the loss of it, the happy times, the good times. But will you always grieve that relationship? Especially when you have new ones that enter your life? Maybe not. Maybe you are in a difficult situation and you have to move away from the home you've ever known. But maybe someday you get to move back there again. So grief is ever flowing and always changing. And some of the things that we grieve over in our lifetime dissipate and may not even be in our relative consciousness anymore, just compartmentalized as part of your journey somewhere in your brain, of your journey of your life. And then there's the grief that never goes away. It changes, it morphs into different things, but it never goes away. And it's a big part of our mental health. And that's why in Mental Health Awareness Month, I find it so imperative that this is one of the topics that I talk about. And it also could have a lot to do with that I am currently grieving. And so I want to talk here. This is part of how I cope with my grief and how I grieve in so many different ways. I want you to think about if you're currently grieving or something you've grieved over that's still with you. How do you grieve? What do you actually do in your grief process? For me, like when my grandparents passed away, or my aunts and uncles, or my father, well, they were all getting older. And there's something that happens in our brain, even though it might not be at a conscious level. We see these people getting older. For me, these people passed away when they were older, much older. And so our brain sees that. And though it may not be in the forefront, there's part of our brain that's preparing ourselves as we see them get older for the time where they'll no longer be here. And though, of course, I grieve all of them, still to this day, especially my father, the grief changes. It's painful, it's sad, but I think more of the happy times now because my brain was preparing me for it. I hoped that I had maybe 10 more years, but I didn't. But I saw my dad getting slower and his hair turning white, hair that stayed dark for so long, and his memory not the same, and just those things he couldn't do anymore, helps our brain process and gets us ready for the time where they pass. And so it's sad, and I still grieve, and I still cry at times, and I miss all of them terribly. There was a part of me that knew it was coming. And so in that, it helps with the grief, the acceptance of the loss. When people pass away very young, the grief looks so different. It's as painful as any other grief. The loss, the emptiness. But there's this added component of knowing that time was taken away from them. If it's a child, so a lifetime is taken away from them. A younger person, again, a lifetime. And even someone in their 50s, which is still relatively young, a whole lifetime is taken away. And that makes it harder for the brain to wrap its thoughts around and its acceptance around. I've found myself in that zone where I've had grief because they were older. I was able to process it. I hate to say it, but so much easier because my brain was preparing me for it. But this other grief that I'm experiencing currently was of someone in their 50s, one of my best friends. And for some reason, this grief is so different for me. Seeing her children have their first Mother's Day without her, and her husband, and her mother, and her father, and her siblings, and her friends and family. It's something that I've never experienced before. And if you've lost someone young, I'm sure that I'm tapping into a nerve, a feeling. And I think for me, I don't grieve for myself, my sadness of me missing her. I didn't see her every day. I didn't talk to her every day. Probably once a week. Texting, yes, all the time. And seeing each other as much as we could. Especially with her getting her treatments. What I really grieve is for her children and her husband and her mother and her father and her siblings, where time was stolen away from them. Girls that have to live most of their life without their mom. That's what I grieve. Before I came to do this podcast, I did my traditional sitting outside. It was super hot yesterday in Florida, but for some reason in the shade today, it was okay. And I was sitting outside contemplating which way to go with this podcast. And yes, literally, this podcast was decided on about 20 minutes ago. And it got me thinking as I looked into the sky and I watched the birds dance and the ducks on the water, my dog sniffing and playing around in the grass. These are the simple things that she doesn't get to do anymore. And how do I look at these things that are so tangible that I can touch, but I can't do that with her anymore? And so my brain isn't able to process this grief in the same way. Maybe you can relate to this. What I've noticed that I've been doing with this grieving of my best friend is there are moments and there are things that remind me of her. We drove down the main street yesterday for the very first time since she passed. And I was with my daughter and she was driving, and we weren't thinking, we were following the navigation and whatever. And this overwhelming feeling of grief came over me. But in that moment, I didn't want to cry. It just didn't feel right in that moment. And I stuffed it. And when I see on my Facebook memories that pop up, and there she is. But I'm sitting, waiting for a friend to arrive for lunch. I can't cry at that moment, so I stuff it. Or we recently went on a girls' trip, the first time without her. But so much of her was there. But in those moments, it wasn't appropriate. So I stuffed it. And tomorrow, her older daughter is an author. She has 4 books out. Her name is Jess Taylor. Check her out if you love romance, steamy romance. That's her book. It's a 4-book series. I'm not sure if she has anything else out just yet. But check her out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble online. You can find her book. And you really can get lost in it. And she created a beachside book convention, which is starting tomorrow in South Florida. Sold out, and a lot of us are volunteering. And when her mom was alive, obviously her mom planned on being there, and we all said how we wanted to help. We're not just helping now because her mom's passed away. I was going to help no matter what. But that's bringing up a lot of emotion for me. And I know I'm going to have to stuff it. You know what I'm talking about. When you're grieving and it's not the right moment. Maybe you're a teacher and just something in the classroom, something a student says, something happens, reminds you of the person that you're grieving. Well, that's not the appropriate moment to let it out, so you stuff it. We're very good at stuffing our emotions. And that's okay if it's not an appropriate moment to feel, to let loose, to let the grief flow. We have to be appropriate, obviously. You can't be sitting in the middle of a board meeting and start crying because something someone said, or your friend, maybe whoever you're grieving used to work with you and they're no longer there. It's not appropriate, so you stuff. Okay, it's okay to stuff when it's not an appropriate time to let it flow. But the key is you have to let it flow. But do you let it flow? Or do you just continue to stuff? You know what happens when you have a bear or a stuffed animal and you keep putting stuffing in? Well, it gets to the point where you can't stuff it any further. And if you keep trying to stuff it, the seams start to bust and break and open up. And that's exactly what happens to us. When we stuff and stuff and stuff, we eventually break at the seams. And when we break, it can be quite something. Quite something. And it can come out in many different ways. Anger, violence, frustration, screaming, banging, hitting things, letting out a huge wail, maybe crawling into bed and just pulling the covers over your head because you've stuffed for so long that when it comes out, it is so powerful, but not powerful in a healthy, positive release because it's built up so much that you basically explode. So if that's how you grieve, it's time to change. It's time to unstuff, to relax the seams so that they're not ready to burst. And how do you do that? Well, for me, sometimes I actually plan it. You're probably going, how do you plan letting out grief? I do. I just did. I felt it building this week, knowing I'm going to this convention and I'm going to feel her loss. She will not be there. And so I felt it building inside me. And I knew that before I did a podcast, and at that point didn't know what I was going to do it on, I needed to release my grief, which turned into this podcast. But what did I do? I sat outside, like I told you. I did a meditation, couldn't focus. Meditation just, well, I finished it, but it wasn't great because I couldn't focus. And then I put on, which I love, just some Native American flute music, just the flute playing with my earbuds in, watching nature, feeling nature, looking at the big blue open sky. And I opened up in that moment of looking at the beauty around me, listening to the sound of this music. I opened up like a dam, holding back the water, stuffing the water back, holding it back. But then I intentionally, at a most appropriate moment and time that I've set aside for myself, I let the dam open. And boy, did those tears flow. Because I miss my friend. I didn't cry for me, though. I cried because I grieve for her family. And more importantly, I grieve for her. All of us who were part of her group spent a lot of group time with her and individual time with her. She had first diagnosed, had 7 years of being cancer-free, and then it came back. And in those 3.5, I think it was almost 4 years of her in this battle, I watched a warrior and someone that I never thought would lose the battle. My brain didn't let me or prepare me for that thought like it did with people that I see aging. And she always had this warrior stance and this warrior thought process that she was never going to lose the battle. And really, up until the last 2 weeks, nobody thought she was going to lose the battle. It just happened very quickly. Again, hard for the brain to process. And so as I sat there in the backyard, this was my flow of grief. Grieving for her family. Grieving for her and what she's missing. And knowing how much life she had inside of her that was taken away way before she was ready to go. And so that's my grief now as I grieve my friend. And it felt good to let it out, to cry, to sob, to shake my head in disbelief. But I set aside a time because I felt it building. I know I have to go to this event. I want to be there. I'm excited for her daughter. I'm excited to see what she did. I don't want to feel this stuffing that my seams are about to bust. So I knew that I had to set time aside to allow myself to feel the grief, the sadness, the loss, the emptiness. Just missing that person. And that's one of the biggest coping skills that I can give you, is to set the time aside to allow yourself to feel. Your person may have passed away years ago, but yet you still grieve and you still stuff. And there will always be things that happen or you see or you feel that will remind you of those people. And you may feel that sadness building up. You know, you feel it building in your throat and you're holding it back because it's not the right moment to cry. And you push it back down. But where does it go? It's in a ball inside of you, wrapped so tightly that it needs to be released sometime, somewhere, someplace. So whatever your grief is, whatever it may be, like I discussed in the beginning of this podcast, grief comes in so many different forms and over so many different things. It's not just about someone passing away, an animal passing away. It's about loss of things and people and places, lifestyles, relationships. So many things are loss. And if we don't give ourselves the time to allow that feeling that we get as the sadness builds up in our throat and we push it back down. If we don't release it, it can take a physical toll on us. A literal physical toll. So if you're someone who has grief in your life, and eventually we all do, in some way, shape, or form. It's so hard to think when you have a child in your life and they've never experienced any type of loss, and then they experience their first loss, some younger, some older. Watching them as they experience this loss for the first time is very powerful and very painful. It's almost like, when your kid hears about Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy, when they hear the truth about that, you see that little sparkle disappear, the magical thinking. And the same thing happens the first time we experience any type of grief. It is so painful, it is so powerful that it takes some of that sparkle away from us. A sparkle that we can never get back. And though we can't get the sparkle back, because now that protective bubble of everything just going the way it's supposed to gets popped, we have to learn, adapt, and learn how to cope with the loss of people, places, and things. So if you are grieving, if it's new, if it's years old, whatever the grief is, but you know that you stuff it, I want you to set some time aside today, sometime today. And if I hear that I can't today, okay, maybe you're on an airplane, it's not possible. The minute that you know you have time, I want you to set time aside. I want you to pick a place that you feel comfortable enough to let it go, to let it come up from deep down inside of you and out of you. And however that looks, whatever that is that you do to have this release. I mean, think outside the box maybe. Maybe you take boxing lessons, or you belong to a gym and there's a boxing bag. Go ahead and hit it, pound on it, let it out. Let the tears flow if you need to as you pound away at the punching bag. Find what works for you. For me, it's as simple as sitting in my backyard. But for you, your makeup is very different. And what does that look like for you? Maybe it's going to a racquetball place and just slamming a ball with your racket against the wall over and over and over again to let your anger out, your sadness, your frustration. It can be something very simple, but make sure it's in a place where you can let the emotions flow. It may not be tears. For me, it's tears. For you, it may be just punching away at a bag. Maybe it's going to a spin class where you just gotta get that energy out. But I don't want you to not think about the person. See, part of this process is to allow you to think about the person or whatever you are grieving. Because like I told you, driving down the street near my friend's house, it wasn't the time. And I could feel myself stuffing, physically pushing it away. That's got to come out. It's got to come out for you to grieve in a healthy manner, for it to not take its toll on you physically. So I want you to figure out today or tomorrow, set the time aside to allow it to flow in whatever way is beneficial to you. It could just be simply sitting in a quiet space and letting the tears flow, thinking about that person or that place or that thing that you've lost. Allow yourself to think about them. Allow yourself to experience the sadness. Feel the release. Your body will thank you for it. Your heart will thank you for it. Your head will thank you for it. And you will thank yourself for allowing yourself to grieve, for allowing it to come out so that you can move forward in the grief process. That is never ending, but it just changes, looks different as time moves on. But it doesn't mean that you still don't grieve. So the question was, as we started this, how do you grieve? Well, now you have a plan to take some time aside to allow yourself to grieve. Let it flow. Let it out. Because this is how you cope with grief. If you have ways that you cope with grief, please, you can go to my Podbean account, any of my social media, anywhere you listen to my podcast, you can make comments. Let me know how you grieve. Because there is no formula or recipe. It's different for everyone. And sometimes those creative ways, by sharing those, you can help somebody else in their grief process. So in Mental Health Awareness Month, grief, the stigma of mental health, how it is in society, which was last week's podcast, episode 190. Take a listen to that if you haven't listened, about the stigma of mental health. We're here to open up about it, to talk about it, because there is nobody on this planet immune from mental health issues. Thank you so much for joining me today at Wide Open Spaces with Elise, the Fiery Redhead. Remember, positive thoughts always create positive energy. Go out and explore all those wide open spaces in your world. It's getting warm out there. Summer is upon us. I smell summer. And what are you going to do this summer? Remember, like, love, and follow on all my social media. And until next time, my friends, ciao.